Welcome back to the Lakers Takes podcast. This is episode 2. I am your host, Edwin Garcia, and today we're going to talk about all the Lakers preseason action. There are 2 games against the Phoenix Suns and their matchup against the Golden State Warriors. We'll talk about the couple injuries they've picked up along the way, including injuries to Ariza, Monk, and THT, and we'll have a deeper conversation about the importance of the preseason, or the lack of importance to the preseason according to the Lakers players. And we'll look ahead at the final 2 preseason games left. Let's get into it. Alright, so the first game that happened this week was the Lakers losing against the Phoenix Suns 117-105. It was similar to the first preseason game. You had key players missing against the Phoenix Suns. The Lakers played without LeBron, without Russ, without Ariza, and without Dwight Howard. After the game, we found out that actually Ariza wasn't just missing for this game. He's going to be missing for quite some time. He injured his ankle and needs to get it operated on. And at this point, it's about an 8-week recovery time. And according to other experts, it's probably going to be longer than that for him to be able to feel comfortable and play at an NBA level on that ankle. So he's definitely going to be gone for a couple months, maybe even more. And I don't think this is the biggest blow, but obviously it's not ideal. You want your players healthy. You want everyone ready to go. And, this early to already have an injury that's going to be this long into the season is not ideal for a team that I think was looking forward to having Ariza and using Ariza. And now that's off the table. So, again, I don't think it's a huge blow, but obviously you want everyone healthy. That's the number one thing when we mentioned on the first episode here is that for the preseason, even with all the things about the results and effort and lineups, if everyone's healthy, you'll take that. And the Lakers already cannot say that for this preseason. At the minimum, they have Ariza out for 8 weeks. All right, so obviously the score 117-105, the Lakers didn't play too well. They lost the game. But again, it's preseason. You don't really want to worry too much about the literal results. In my opinion, you want to see the key players and how they played and in what roles the coaching staff is putting them in and how they are playing in those roles. So we do have a few highlights. Melo played pretty well. He had a really nice 8-point run where he kind of had a mini run on his own, and he had some really bright spots in this game. I think this was the first time we saw Melo, and we thought, hey, man, he looks really good. I think this role really fits him. He just got to get out there, get some buckets, and then get out of there in like 10, 15, 20 minutes, and he did that very well in this game. We also had more of the Monk propaganda. Monk had another monster game. He played 22 minutes, had 18 points, went 7 for 11 from the field, so his shooting was amazing. 4 from 7 from 3. I mean, that's the kind of player the Lakers really haven't had coming off the bench, for the entire duration of the LeBron era here in LA. We haven't had knockdown shooters who can be that consistent and that explosive, and at least for this preseason game and previous preseason games, he's played really well and has been a spark offensively. So that was another really good game from Monk, and he's really had nothing but good games for the most part. A few defensive lapses that aren't positive, but offensively he's definitely produced every time he's been on the court for the Lakers. And I think AD had a kind of meh performance. It wasn't really amazing or anything. It also wasn't terrible, but 14 points, 8 rebounds in 25 minutes, maybe a little bit better than his first run, but nothing to really get super excited about. Again, with a player like AD, I've seen enough data to know he's going to be just fine. He's going to be an all-star, superstar. He's going to be great. But just in this game, he was just okay. But again, no big deal. We know exactly what AD is and what he's going to be overall in the season, so it's not too concerning. THT, he was 2 for 4 from 3. Poor defensively. He blew a lot of coverages in this game. Wasn't really excited about him. 11 points in 24 minutes. I think it was another kind of low game for THT against the Warriors. After that game, the Lakers went on to play Golden State. In another loss, they lost 121-114. Starting to notice a trend here. We haven't had a victory so far. And, Russell Westbrook made his Lakers debut, which got us all excited. We were pumped up. The Brody, Long Beach native, LA homeboy, UCLA athlete is part of the Lakers, and it was a dud. A dud. 2 points, 7 assists, 4 rebounds. He was tentative. He was sloppy. It was not good. It was not good at all. He looked so uncomfortable out there. It just overall didn't go well. Again, I'm not worried. I've watched enough of Russell Westbrook's career to know those games will happen. And I also know those amazing games where he looks like one of the greatest point guards to ever walk this earth will happen. So I understand that, but for a debut, it was really, really rough. But again, they're working it out. It's a work in progress. They'll get it together. But yes, he did not look good. I can't lie to you. He didn't look good. He didn't play well. And that's kind of where things were for Russ in his first game as a Laker. You know who did look good, though? Dwight Howard. He had 23 points, 12 rebounds in 24 minutes of action. He's been a monster. He's been explosive. Overall, he's been a good, positive, exciting player every time he's been on the court, which is no surprise to any Lakers fans because they saw this Dwight Howard just a couple seasons ago when the Lakers won a championship. So he's back, he's rejuvenated, and he's producing just like we thought, just like we expected. And he's been a pleasure. And that's what you do want to see. I just want to see those players in those opportunities play well. We'll worry about results when the results will actually count towards the record, but I just want to see good play from those players in the moments when they're playing in roles very similar to the roles they'll have in the regular season, which again is just, at this point, at the time of this recording, it's about 10 days away. So I'm guessing the player you are now will probably be very close to the player you are 10 days from now, because that's not a long amount of time. So I'm really happy with what I saw from Dwight Howard and what I've seen from Dwight Howard, not only in the past, but in the present. THT had a better game, 17 points in 20 minutes. He was a bit more, active offensively. And same thing with Austin Reeves, the hillbilly Kobe, as he's called, had 9 points in his 16 minutes. So I think those players had good contributing moments in this game. They were some of the positives here. But ultimately, it's clear that the Lakers have a long way to go before they have the chemistry and ability to really compete against the top teams. We saw when the Warriors were clicking on all cylinders, the Lakers never ever looked like that for any moments of the game. They were just, playing so well and the chemistry was there. And of course, that's obvious. The Lakers don't have the chemistry the Warriors have because Steve Kerr has been working with a lot of these guys for years. Draymond, Steph, Iguodala's there. They just have a chemistry that you can't fake chemistry, and they have that chemistry because they've been working together for years and years and years and years. And the Lakers don't have that. These players have never played together, almost any of them. There's 3 players back from last season, 5 players who've ever played for Vogel total, at least in the modern era, during his Laker years, and it shows. Players seem out of place, they don't seem comfortable, they don't know where they need to be, they don't know where they're going to get their looks from, and if people know when they're doing this, when they're doing that. We're seeing a lot of that here, and it just feels disjointed. And other top teams, the Jazz don't have this problem, the Clippers don't have this problem, the Warriors don't have this problem, the Suns don't have this problem, because they've been establishing and building something for years, and the core of those teams does not change. Just some of the role players, some of the fringe players adjust, but that core is the same. That core is solid and solidified. And that's the Lakers' struggle and problem in the preseason and going into the regular season. How quickly can they get that chemistry, get rolling, and start catching up to these teams that are ahead of them because they have years and years of chemistry that they've built. And after this game was the first time I think we saw Lakers Twitter and the media kind of rising up about the concerns. Now you don't have as many excuses. We've seen LeBron, we've seen AD, we've seen Russ, not all together, but we've seen them all, and no one's really looked particularly good, and people have so many questions about how this team's going to work, and the spacing, and who's the center, and who's the backup center, and who's your shooting guard, and all these questions, and there still haven't been answers that have came out based on these games. I still think the questions are the same, and then you're getting the results which aren't good, and not only that, but even the performances, they're very mixed. You're not getting good performances from your great players, and it's starting to kind of create this conversation about what's going on with this team, even if maybe it's overblown or an overreaction. I think the truth's probably somewhere in the middle, and it's starting to cause like a bit of, I would say controversy, but just conversation about what's going on with the team in preseason. And LeBron kind of answered some of those questions with his comments, and I want to read what he said here. And I'm reading the quotes from the Silver Screen and Roll article titled "LeBron James literally does not care about the preseason." So here's what LeBron had to say after the Warriors game when it comes to preseason and how much it matters and all these things that have kind of been coming up. He says, quote, "It means something as far as individuals getting in rhythm, getting in game shape. We have our practices, but being out on the floor and bumping up against another team and things of the nature, that helps. All I'm saying is that for me, there's nothing I'm going to learn in preseason at this point in my career," James said, laughing. Then when he went a little bit further about this, he said, when it comes to how much it means, that it means nothing at all. He said, quote, "Nothing at all. I'm not going to learn anything. Nothing. That means zero. working our habits and building camaraderie and chemistry on the floor, that's always good. Like I said, I love the practices more than the preseason games because you're making mistakes and you figure it out right there. You're able to stop and just talk about it and things of that nature and go back and forth and rewatch things. We can do that obviously the next day after a preseason game, but we do it right on the fly in practices. So I'm more inclined to love those more at this point because there's nothing on the floor that I'm going to learn for me individually, end quote. So I think there's a lot to unpack here. I hate arguing with a legend like LeBron because he's LeBron James. He has the data, he has the experience, he has the knowledge, and he's been there. So I always try to be careful whenever I'm talking about any legends who know their information on the game when I disagree, because even with all the knowledge that I have about the sport, all the work that I do to get better at learning about the sport, I'll always have that separation because I've never played at the NBA level and I'm never going to play at the NBA level. So I try to be respectful of that. My pushback is kind of some of the things he mentioned, which, yes, for you, I agree. But it's not just about you. It's about the team and getting the team together and getting the team to the best ability they can possibly be at as quickly as possible. And that's impossible to do when you're not on the court, and impossible to do when none of you are taking it seriously here. And the thing is, yes, some of you have had success. A lot of you have not. And how are we going to get those players like Russ to understand what needs to happen, what he needs to do, how he's going to work with the other players on this team so that they can get to their best performance? And again, I'm not at the practices yet. I'm not there. I'm not seeing how things are going. Maybe all that's happening, and the truth is, if we could see it, we wouldn't have any questions. But we don't see it. All we see is the preseason right now, and that data is not coming back with anything that's reassuring most of Lakers Nation. Most of Lakers Nation that's reassured right now is either just super fans who are never going to say anything's wrong, or people who are just saying, hey, even though everything looks bad, I'm going to hold my thoughts until the games are real. But no one's actually looking at the games and saying, they look great. What are you talking about? They look awesome. This is awesome. No one is saying that. They are not looking good, and that's a problem. And the main problem is you're not actually trying with your starting lineup. Maybe once we see that, all this goes away. And I think you should be trying at least a little bit for little pockets, maybe 8 minutes here, 6 minutes here, just to start the game, just so we can get some of those reps in. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe some professional athletes could really help with this, but I don't think any practice is ever as intense as even a preseason game, because the other team doesn't care about you. They're still going to go a little bit harder than your friend is at practice, even if your friend's going to go really hard because you guys are trying to get better. It's just different when it's a team that's facing you. There's referees involved. There's the flow of, the crowd, actual high-pressure situation that we're not going to run it back. And like he said, we pause and we break stuff down. The real game doesn't work that way. It's flowing, it's bouncing. It's an honest result without any time to double check and work on stuff. So I think it would be good to get into that groove a little bit so the team can start off positively in those first 10, 20 games of the regular season. And with the results that are happening now and the nonchalantness, I'm a little concerned that there might be a slower start than even I thought there would be, because they're going to have to work on these things in the regular season because it didn't work on it during training camp and preseason. But again, that might be a little bit too ahead, but that's my concern with the quote. That kind of, I'm not worried about it. I'm like, well, yeah, for you, LeBron James, you're right. He's going to be LeBron James. He's going to be great. But I've seen LeBron James be LeBron James, and this team's a borderline 500 team, with Lonzo and Kuz's first year. I'm not trying to see this team struggling to begin because they didn't do the work during the preseason to get it together. That's all. That's my concern. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, all those concerns are a waste. And again, concerns lightly, I don't think the team has any big problems long-term because there's a whole long season to work it out. I'm talking more in that first 10, 20 games. How ugly does it look? But, we'll see. Hopefully, they start to look good, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that after we recap the final game of the week, and that was the Lakers again against the Suns. They played them in the beginning of the week. They played them at the end of the week on Sunday, and they lost 123-94. The Lakers are 0-4 in the preseason. They got blown out again, and it was another rough outing for the Lakers. There were pockets of positivity, but it was never sustained for long and never enough to really impact the score. Good players from the Lakers in this game. Again, Melo. Melo's really been a bucket. People forget Melo's a bucket. He's a really good basketball player. 17 points in 16 minutes, 5 for 7 from 3, which is incredible. He was awesome from 3-point land, and you have to be excited and optimistic with how he's shooting. If he can stay comfortable in this role and continue on, it's going to be a good time having Melo on the Lakers. Another good player whose stat line doesn't really show it is Bazemore. He only had 8 points, but man, he was great on rotations, great closing out, great deflecting balls, causing disruption, causing havoc. He had 4 steals. I mean, that he was just as active as it gets. And I'm still not a big Kent Bazemore fan, to be honest, but I do acknowledge he is a solid defensive player. And today he took that and played at an optimum level defensively. And that's why I think he will start, because I think, again, if it's close, Vogel's going to go with defense. And Bazemore so far has shown he gives you that defense. And he looked impressive tonight defensively. So props to Bazemore. I give him grief when I'm not a fan, but I'm also going to give him props when he plays well. And in this particular game, no debate, he was a defensive star and a positive on a game that had more negatives than positives. Dwight I liked as well. He didn't play for long. He only played for 12 minutes, had a couple points and a few rebounds, 3 rebounds. But I like Dwight. I think he was a really good rim protector. He deflected a few balls. I saw a few times after he got a couple big blocks in the game. After he got a big block in the game, I saw players kind of being hesitant of driving all the way to the rim, and there was a couple misses that Dwight kind of created that don't show up on the stat sheet. There was one play where I forgot who the guard was that drove in the lane, but they drove in the lane, they saw Dwight, and then they got hesitant. They passed the ball to McGee, and McGee just kind of shot a runner at the basket and missed, and that doesn't show up on the stat sheet as like a positive from Dwight, but when you watch it, you see, that error happened because the player was scared of shooting over Dwight. They passed the ball to someone else. That other person had a difficult shot and they didn't make it. And that's the kind of impact Dwight Howard had tonight. That's the kind of impact he has and how he protects the rim. And I love that about Dwight. So I still think it was a pretty good Dwight game, even though, he didn't have that monster 23 points like he had earlier in the week. I thought it was pretty positive. AD, he played in this game. It was all right. He was fine. He was productive. He had 19 points, 28 minutes. So, it was a decent kind of average game for AD. I'm not too worried about him, but it was fine. It was a solid outing from AD. Russell Westbrook also played in this game, but again, it was another rough outing. It just was really rough. He had only 8 points in his 26 minutes and 9 turnovers. A lot of turnovers from Russell Westbrook. He made some colorful comments after the game to the media saying that, luckily the turnovers don't count because the game doesn't count. And, he kind of talked about, hey, I could have had 15 turnovers, and used some colorful language there to express his nonchalantness about the situation, and he even mentioned, keep that same energy when I got 20 assists, talking about my turnovers right now. But I love that energy from Russ. But again, it's when you play bad, they're gonna say something, and when you play good, they're gonna say something. So it won't always be one way, unfortunately. It'll be interesting to see how Russell Westbrook continues to respond to the LA media as time progresses. But yeah, it was interesting hearing his post-game comments. Again, another game, LeBron didn't play in this one, so we have yet to see all 3 of the Lakers' big 3 play together, and this game was no exception. Now, the good news is this will no longer be true because after the game, it was reported, and AD talked about the fact that the Lakers will have all 3 of their big 3 playing together finally. So you're going to get LeBron, you're going to get AD, you're going to get Russell Westbrook. They're all going to play together, and you're going to get AD at the 5. So we're going to actually see this team potentially, at their fullest and what that looks like. And that's all I'm asking for. That's all I wanted. Before the preseason started, Frank Vogel mentioned that there would be like 2 games that happens. Looks like it's going to be the final 2 games. So, hey, maybe we were just reading into this a little too early, and we're going to see the Lakers' amazing, wonderful, super duper team, right away as soon as they get an opportunity to play together as kind of a full roster, minus, of course, Ariza and the few other injuries we're going to talk about in a moment. But we'll see. I'm definitely excited for the next preseason game because we're going to get the big three together, and we're going to finally see what they really look like against actual competition that's going to be stopping them, not just teammates, in warm-up jerseys. Now, there have been a couple other injuries that have been reported besides the Ariza one. THT has an issue with his thumb. We don't know more about that at this point. They're still getting some more information, so I'll keep you updated as soon as I know more. But right now, that's still kind of in question of how many games will he miss, how serious is it. We just don't have that information. With Malik Monk, we do have a little bit more information. He's suffering a groin strain, and we know those injuries can be very serious. Lakers fans can remember AD had the same injury, and it took him out of the playoffs pretty much and ended his season. Obviously, this is early on in the season, so that's not the concern with Malik Monk, but groins are really tough, especially those groin strains. They're really difficult. It's really hard to know how serious it actually is because, again, we don't have the information, and we weren't able to see the injury because it didn't happen on the court. So the Lakers have mentioned that they're optimistic that Malik Monk can be back by the opening night against the Warriors in about 10 days on October 19th. I'm a little less excited about that prospect. I don't think that's going to happen. I've kind of become a mini groin strain expert because of being a Lakers, fanatic here. And unfortunately, I think it's closer to 4 weeks, that 4 and 8 week window. Again, I don't have the medical information on his injury to really comment, but I would just be surprised if he was ready by the first game of the season. That just seems too soon. That would put him around 2 weeks of this injury. That seems a bit too soon. Again, this won't be a super serious injury as long as you take care of it. It can be a nagging injury. It can take a little bit more time than you think. Every groin strain is a bit different and unique, and how players can handle it. So without that information, it's hard to tell. Obviously, if the Lakers think opening day, you would think, okay, cool, then maybe that's what it is. But they're known for undershooting when an injury is going to be okay and then being way off. We've seen that historically throughout the years. I don't know why it's always so bad. They'll say 2 or 4 weeks, it'll be 8 to 12 weeks, and you're like, how is this possible? And then they'll say, oh, they're on schedule, and I'm like, how is it possible they're on schedule when you said 2 weeks and we're on week 7 and you don't have a timeline anymore? So I'm trying not to panic or anything, but honestly, Malik Monk's been one of the bright spots of the preseason, and I'd love to have him healthy. And I'm thinking we're looking more at 4 weeks to 8 weeks here. But I'm hoping I'm wrong, and I'm hoping we get some information from the Lakers and a little bit more transparency this year on what the injuries are and when they are likely to return from injury. We'll see what happens. All right, and we have 2 games left in the preseason. As I mentioned, the next game is against the Golden State Warriors, and the big three will finally play. LeBron, AD, Russ, and AD at the 5. How exciting is that going to be? That's going to happen on Tuesday, October 12th against the Warriors at 7:30. And then the final preseason game is October 14th against the Sacramento Kings. That's a Thursday at 7 o'clock. So after that, we'll be done with the preseason, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty. We'll get into the actual games that quote-unquote matter. And I'm really excited about that. That way we can stop with this whole hypothetical stuff, and we can really get into it, and there'll be no excuses for, oh, we're just starting out, or we're just trying out, or don't read into these games. Okay, fine. Let's see what happens when the regular season starts, and the regular season does start on October 19th against the Golden State Warriors. So I'm so excited. I'm sure all of Lakers Nation is as well. NBA season is going to start. The NBA is back, and we're going to see what this 2021-2022 team is really about once the games become official. But before that happens, on my YouTube channel, I'm going to predict the team's overall record. I wanted to wait until preseason was over so I can get a better idea of the team. Unfortunately, because they haven't really played them seriously, these games, I don't think I really have gotten that information, but I will have 2 more games. Hopefully they play these seriously and I can have a better idea. But I'm going to predict every single game of the season and give you a solid number on where I think the team's going to end up. I'm really excited to do this. I did this last year. I started off good on my predictions about halfway into the year, and then injuries just destroyed it. So I'm optimistic this year I can get that number correct, and hopefully the team's healthy so my data kind of matches that the team will be relatively healthy, but obviously we don't know. But I'm really excited to do that. I'll do that on my YouTube channel and post that up. I'll also break it down here and talk about it as part of a big regular season preview, which will be the next podcast, episode 3, which will come out on Monday morning of next week. So I'm really excited about that, kicking off the 3rd episode, kicking off the new season, and seeing how good this Lakers team can be when they're all together and the games matter. So I'm really looking forward to that. But before that, we're going to watch these preseason games, finish the preseason strong, hopefully, and hopefully without any more injuries, because again, that's the main thing. I'll take all these blowouts, go 0-6, no big deal. Just make sure you're healthy. And it looks like we already are going to be a little banged up with Ariza out for a while, maybe Monk's out for a while, and we're still waiting on THT's news. So hopefully we get positive news on that front, but we'll have to wait and see. All right, so that's it for this episode. The next time I talk to you, the preseason will be over, so we'll recap the last 2 games. We'll double check on the injury report, and then we'll preview the 2021-2022 regular season, because it will be here. I'm so excited. I can't wait. This season is going to be awesome. It's going to be special, and I'm just so grateful and thankful that you're here with me on this journey, on this podcast, experiencing Lakers basketball in this new season. All right. That's it for the podcast. Have a good rest of your day, and go Lakers.